Just Dash today with Rollin' Bones in. Dunn could not join me today, so we're going to be trying something different. I have to apologize in advance today because we are testing some other cameras and seeing how they will, if they can improve our quality. So hopefully those work, but there will be some variation in camera quality as we get in today's filming. Today we are going to be making different types of brick walls. I don't know if you can see that very well. Block style walls and then regular brick style walls. These are simple, easy, anybody can get started on these. I chose to start crafting with these on this channel because they are simple and usable in a variety of games, from tabletop war games to RPGs like GURPS and Dungeons and Dragons, as well as any of the skirmish games. So hopefully this is beneficial to some of you and enjoyable to others of you. So first, the materials that you will need for this are foam, depending on which type of wall you're going for or what your circumstances are. I'm going to be using two different types of foam. First, we have the blue foam for insulation for construction and things. You can get this from Lowe's, or you can order it online. I'm using the 1/2-inch blue foam. You can use whatever foam you would like. The other foam that I use often is the pink foam that I get at Home Depot, but it's 1 inch and I wanted the 1/2 inch. The other material we need is that you can use is foam core. There are a variety of foam cores that I can get close by here. There is Ready Board that you can get from the dollar store, which is great because the paper peels off easily, and I will show you that later. There's also like Elmer's and things like that the paper does not peel off, and they both have their uses. Today we want the stuff that the paper peels freely from. We also will need glue, white glue, Elmer's glue, school glue. You can use tacky glue. I use this a lot. Today I won't be using this, but this works as well too. You could also use a hot glue gun. It makes things faster, easier. Just for the purposes of this video, I will just be using the white school glue. Paint, I just use this cheap paint that I can pick up at the hobby store, and Mod Podge, which we will explain in another step how to use it and what I use it for. I mix it with black paint or any colored paint to give a protective coating to the foam products that I build. As far as tools that I will be using, a cutting mat is pretty important to use to protect your work area. Another thing is a blade to cut the foam with. I like these retractable replaceable blades. You want to have sharp blades when you're doing this, so check your blades, replace them or sharpen whatever you're using, because foam will dull your blades really quick, and it makes it a lot easier and you get a lot straighter cut if you have sharp blades. Another thing that you will want is just a cheap ballpoint pen or mechanical pencil. These work very well when drawing in the lines. You also want some sort of ruler. I really like this drafting ruler. It helps out a lot to get me a straight edge and to do things like that. I also use a small square. This helps out a lot too. Also, you will need paint brushes. I just use whatever cheap brushes I can get, various size. This for my big base coating. We need to decide the size of a wall that you want to make. With this technique, you can make walls any height, from just a very small wall that will only cover half the miniature, depending on what type of game you're playing, to very large walls for bunkers and for compounds and things like that. One of the things that I like to do is pull out the mini that I might be using for whichever game, or if I'm going to be playing multiple games, just to pull out one and decide how big I want to make my walls. And so I will grab one of my measuring instruments and check the height. So if I'm doing something with a war game and there's going to be weapons teams, things like that that they want to shoot through, I will look and see just at about 3/4 of an inch is where this barrel will be able to fire over. So I will look at building a wall that height. Determine what size wall you want and what you're going to be using the wall for, and then you can go from there. My walls will be about 2 inches, and some of them will have some damage down to make it down to 3/4 of an inch, just to make them versatile and be able to be used in many, many games. To prepare our foam, we take our piece of foam and we measure out how far we want this. So I'm going to be putting this at 2 inches. Make my mark here. It's going to go this way. Make my mark here, and then make my mark here. And then come along with this one. The cut for the mark for our wall. Begin to cut there. So when cutting foam, it's easiest to have your blade at an angle and just pull through doing shallow cuts. And just take a few passes. Don't try and cut it all at once. You'll get a much smoother, much better even cut this way, and you don't have to work nearly as hard. So I've got that cut out. Now we need to determine the pattern that we want to use on these. With these, I'm going to use a block pattern instead of a brick pattern. So I will grab my ruler here, and first I will do the vertical brick, and I want each block to be a half inch tall. So I measure a 1/2 inch on each one to here, and then I come over to the other side measuring from the same side. So I measure from the top, not from the bottom, and do the same thing here. Then I can come through, bring my straight edge on here, and make sure that I get straight lines on these. I have to use my straight edge. Some people can do a other uses or other ways of doing it, but I can barely draw a straight line with a ruler, so I use this. Okay, so now I have my lines there. Now I have to determine how long I want my blocks to be, and I want my blocks to be 1 inch long. So I bring it here and go every inch and mark it out. You may find these are a little bigger than you want for your blocks or smaller. You can vary this to whatever variant you want them to be in. Then now that I have those done, I come to those marks and I measure and I draw a line down, and I do that on every other row of bricks. And I'm just showing bricks and blocks today. In a future video, I will show how to do stone, cobblestone, and other types of stone. There are a lot of different ways to do this. This is just the simplest and the easiest. Some ways to do blocks and bricks is to cut them out individually, which can give, depending on what you're going for, that can be a very good way of doing it. but since this way is the quickest and the easiest and the most simple, and I like it, it works fine for what I'm doing. Also, if you have a hot wire table or other things like that, you can use that for these things. I use my Proxon a lot for my buildings, but for today, I'm just going to be doing everything by hand, because this definitely doesn't require, doesn't even, other than doing the main cutouts, doesn't make any difference. So I've done it there. Now, this is a part that I do freehand. I don't worry about whether or not it's precise. But then on these two layers that have not had lines done in them yet, I just come and pick where I think halfway is and make my line there and there. You can continue to measure things out and do it that way if you want to be that precise. This to make your wall. Then you'll want to continue it around to the other side. I just come and bring it straight down off this line so that they match up with both sides. If you're doing a building and you're not going to have any interior, because you can use the same system for your outer walls for your buildings, then you don't need to do the inside of it. But if you're doing just a wall that's going to be out there, you'll want to do both sides. And so I just come around tracing each line around to the other side, and you probably can't see what I'm doing, but then I take those parts that have come through and I just make them a little more pronounced on the opposite side. And then I will use my straight edge to make some horizontal lines, and then I will usually just freehand the vertical lines on this side. I grab my ruler, I come and I match up these lines. Now, because I just pulled them freehand from the other side, they're not going to be exactly level. And again, if you want them to be, and you want to do the work for that, then that is up to you. You will probably have better looking walls, but the extra effort to me right now is not really worth it. And then you just continue the process like I did before. Now that I have that piece done, we're going to move on to making the regular brick wall. With the foam core, I like to cut it with the paper on. Makes it easier to cut for me, so I don't peel the paper off until I get to the cutting area. I'm going to cut it 3 inches tall, and then cut it in half because I want these to be 1.5 inches tall. So mark it out, take my straight edge. I marked this one in the middle because this straight edge doesn't reach all the way across this. Okay, we take our blade, again at an angle, make sure to watch your fingers, make sure they're not under the blade, and just lightly cut along, mostly just cutting the paper on this cut. There we go. Then come and you can cut a little faster and a little deeper, and then one last one just to cut the paper on the other side. Now we have our paper to peel off. So most of the time you can just grab it by the corner. If you get the type that peels off, the Ready board, not the Elmer's board, or you'll just have to test with whichever one you're buying. But the paper peels off very easily. With this, we go through the same process as before. We just change the dimensions of our bricks. So these bricks are going to be 1/4 of an inch tall and a 1/2 inch long. I have it cut down into the smaller section that I'm going to use, and I have this one done. Here I made an accident when I was drawing my lines. That's totally fine. Like Bob Ross used to say, happy little accidents. And we turn those into things that we can use. Cracked bricks, different things like that. Don't stress when you make mistakes like that. So the next issue is what we are going to base these on. By base, I mean what are we going to mount them on so that they stand up and don't fall over. One of the issues with basing is if you're going to be using different surfaces to play on, whether a desert or a forest or a grassland, whatever. If you put a base with a bit of terrain on there, a bit of whatever surface that is, then it makes it difficult to play on other surfaces. An example of that is this little desert ruin that I built. I have it based on a desert terrain and a desert base, and that's fine because this one fits in a desert base. I don't think I will ever use it in a different setting, but these walls need to be able to be played on in many different settings, so I do not want to base them like that. This wall stands up pretty well on its own, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to make some rubble, and it will be fine on its own to stand up that way. This one will need to be done a different way. You can either use foam core to, I'm going to put bigger blocks underneath it, and you can use foam core for that, or you can use foam board. They both work the same. I just had some scrap foam board around, so I'm going to use this as my base so that it sits on here, and then it gives it a wider base so it will stand up, but it can still be put in any type of terrain setting that I want to put it in. So that is what we were going to do with that. An example of that is this little desert ruin that I built. I have it based on a desert terrain and a desert base, and that's fine because this one fits in a desert base. I don't think I will ever use it in a different setting, but these walls need to be able to be played on in many different settings. This wall stands up pretty well on its own, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to make some rubble, and it will be fine on its own to stand up that way. This one will need to be done a different way. You can either use foam core to, I'm going to put bigger blocks underneath it, and you can use foam core for that, or you can use foam board. They both work the same. Then we will move on to gluing this onto the base. So as I said, with this one, I'm going to make it have some damage to it, and that will be the base for it. This one I'm just going to glue on to this base that I prepared for it. And this is where we use just the Elmer's white glue, school glue, whatever the name of it is. You just put a little bit on. It does take a little while to dry. That's one of the advantages of using hot glue or tacky glue for this. But for today's video, we will just be using this. Doesn't have the wisps that come with hot glue, but hot glue does work very well. So find your center And just glue that on there like that and give it time to dry. We'll move on to this. So, what I would like to do is I take my model and I determine how far down I want it to come. So I want it to come down to this first row of bricks. Now, how you want your damage to look is up to you. I am going to choose to have it be that bricks have fallen out. So I take my knife and I pick a spot and I cut down where I have done those bricks. Glue them just to the wall where they have fallen, and that will give us support so that the wall doesn't blow over as we are playing. So just a little bit of glue on here. Well, this video went a little longer than I planned on, so we will end this here with the crafting section done, and we will pick up next week with the painting section. So tune in next week and we will go over how to paint this project that we're working on. Enjoy and have a good week.